Temporality, finitude, is what it is all about. I can resign everything by my own strength and then find peace and rest in the pain. I can tolerate everything, even if that awful demon more frightful than death, the king of terrors that scares people. Even if madness held up a fool's costume before my eyes, and I understood by its look that it was I who should put it on. I can still save my soul if I am otherwise more anxious that my love for God, rather than my worldly happiness, triumphs in me. Even at the last moment, a person can concentrate his whole soul into one single glance towards that heaven from which all good gifts come. And this glance will be understood by him and by one whom it seeks to mean that he still remained true to his love. Then he will calmly put on the costume. Anyone whose soul lacks this romanticism has sold his soul, whether he got a kingdom or a paltry piece of silver for it. But my own strength, I cannot get a least bit of what belongs to finitude, for I continually use my strength to resign everything. By my own strength, I can give up the princess, and I shall not become a sulker, but find joy and peace and rest in my pain. But by my own strength, I cannot get her back again, for I use all my strength just for the act of resigning. But by faith, says that miraculous knight, by faith you will get her by virtue of the absurd. Alas, this movement I cannot make. As soon as I want to begin on it, everything turns around and I fly back to the pain of resignation. I can swim in life, but for this mystical floating I am too heavy. To exist in such a way that my opposition to existence expresses itself at every moment as the most beautiful and most secure harmony with it, that I cannot do. And yet it must be glorious to get the princess. I say this every moment, and the knight of resignation who does not say it is a deceiver. He has not had a single wish, and he has not kept the wish young in his pain. Perhaps I was someone who found it sufficiently convenient that the wish was no longer alive, that their arrow of pain was blunted, but such a person is no knight. A free-born soul who caught himself in that would despise himself and begin afresh, and above all, would not allow his soul to be self-deceived. And yet it must be glorious to get the princess. And yet the knight of faith is the only happy person and heir to the infinite, heir to the finite, while the knight of resignation is a stranger and foreigner. To get the princess in this way, to live joyfully and happily, in and day in and day out with her, for it is also conceivable that the knight of resignation could get the princess, but his soul had clearly perceived the impossibility of their future happiness. So as to live joyfully and happily every moment by virtue of the absurd, every moment to see the sword hanging over the beloved's head, and yet to find not rest in the pain of resignation, but joy by virtue of the absurd. That is miraculous. The one who does that is great, the only great person. The thought of it touches my soul, which was never sparing in admiring greatness. Now, if everyone in my generation, unwilling to stop at faith, is actually a man who has grasped the horror of life, who has understood that what Dobb meant when he said that a soldier standing alone at his post with a loaded rifle by a powder magazine on a stormy night gets strange thoughts. If everyone unwilling to stop at faith is actually a man who has the strength of soul to grasp the thought that the wish was an impossibility, and thereupon gave himself time to become solitary with it, if everyone unwilling to stop at faith is a man who is reconciled in pain and reconciled by pain, if everyone unwilling to stop at faith is a man who subsequently, and if he has not done all the foregoing, then he should not trouble himself when there is talk of faith, perform the miraculous and grasp the whole of existence by virtue of the absurd, then what I write is the highest tribute to the present generation by its lowliest member, who can make only the movement of resignation. But why are they unwilling to stop at faith? Why does one sometimes hear that people are ashamed to acknowledge that they have faith? I cannot understand it. If I ever manage to be able to make this movement, I shall drive with 4 horses into the future. Is it really so? Is all this bourgeois philistinism I see in life, in which I do not permit my words but rather my works to judge, is it really not what it seems? Is it the miracle? It is indeed conceivable, for that hero of faith did indeed have a striking resemblance to it, and was not even an ironist and humorist, but something still higher. Much is said in our time about irony and humor, especially by people who have never known how to practice themselves, but nevertheless know how to explain everything. I am not entirely unfamiliar with these two passions. I know a little bit more about them than what is said in German and German-Danish compendia. I know, therefore, that these two passions are essentially different from the passion of faith. Irony and humor also consider themselves, and therefore belong to, the sphere of infinite resignation. Their flexibility is due to the fact that the individual is incommensurable with actuality. The last movement, the paradoxical movement of faith, I cannot make, be it a duty or whatever, although there is nothing I would rather do. Whether a person has a right to say this must be left up to him. Whether he can come to an amicable agreement in this respect is a matter between him and the eternal being that is the object of faith. What every person can do is make the movement of infinite resignation, and I, for my part, would not hesitate to call anyone a coward who imagines he cannot do it. With faith, it is another matter. But what every person does not have a right to do is make others believe that faith is something lowly, or that it is an easy matter, whereas it is the greatest and the hardest. People construe the story of Abraham in another way. They praise God's grace for giving Isaac to him again. The whole affair was only a trial. A trial. This word can mean much and little, and yet the whole affair is over as soon as it is said. One mounts a winged horse. At that very moment, one is on Mount Moriah. At that very moment, one sees the ram. One forgets that Abraham rode only upon an ass, which goes slowly along the way, that he had a 3-day journey, that he needed some time to chop firewood, to bind Isaac, to draw the knife. And yet one pays tribute to Abraham. The speaker can just as well sleep until the last 15 minutes before he has to speak. The listener can just as well fall asleep during the speech, for everything goes easy enough without trouble from either side. If a man who suffered from insomnia were present, he would perhaps have gone home, sat down in a corner, and thought, "The whole affair is a momentary matter. Just wait a minute, and then you will see the ram and the trial is over." If the speaker were to meet him in this situation, then I imagine he would step up to him in all his dignity and say, "You wretch, to let your soul sink into such folly! No miracle takes place, and the whole of life is a trial." And as the speaker progressed in his effusiveness, the more excited he became, and the more he was pleased with himself. And while he had noticed no congestion of blood when he talked about Abraham, now he could feel the veins swelling in his forehead. Perhaps he would be dumbfounded if the sinner calmly and with dignity replied, "Well, that was what you preached about last Sunday." Let us then either forget Abraham or else learn to be horrified by the prodigious paradox that is the meaning of his life, so that we may understand that our age, like every age, can be joyful if it has faith. If Abraham is not a cipher, a phantom, some showpiece one uses to amuse oneself, then the fault can never lie in the sinner wanting to do likewise. But the point is to see how great what Abraham did was, so that the man can judge for himself whether he has the vocation and courage to be tried in something like this. The comic contradiction in the speaker's behavior was that he made Abraham into a nobody, and yet wanted to forbid the other to conduct himself in the same way.